Tonight we're having another one of our events, our development, design, and construction events. As usual, the house is packed, and part of the reason why the house is packed has to do with the type of events that we put together. They're usually of the highest order, people who are executives in the industry, who do a lot of work not only in New York but around the world. Today's panel in particular will focus on some of the aspects of design, development, construction in New York and nationally, but also we're going to discuss international projects and international work because our audience is also a multicultural, multi-ethnic audience. Thank you for coming, and let's enjoy the event. Today we're going to have Nicholas Billotti, who is the chairman of Turner International, who do work all over the world, multi-billion-dollar work all over the world. He's done some of the tallest buildings in the world, including the Burj Khalifa. We have Jeffrey Dvorett, who's an executive with Kuafu, which is a Chinese company that is coming to New York and is doing a lot of development in the city. We have Alan Poeppel from Langan Engineering, one of the largest geotechnical firms in the world, actually. And he will also discuss projects that they're doing in New York plus around the world. And we have David Rothstein, who's the head of construction for one of the major developers in the New York metropolitan area, Gary Barnett. Gary has done some of the most fantastic luxury buildings in New York, and David is very prolific in terms of a lot of projects in New York at this particular time.
Fourth official event at EMCA, and we're thrilled to say the response has been really strong, both as an organization and an idea. Being from the Eastern Mediterranean, we're interested both in commerce and culture and how the two interact, as they have for millennia in that part of the world. Now tonight is no exception. We have industry leaders from the fields of development, design, and construction who are based locally but operating globally. They'll speak to the challenges and opportunities that face our shared industries and speak to both of those perspectives. Just two quick notes. We have a number of events coming up that you can learn about online if you go to www.emca.com. We're also on Twitter. Please go to our website and sign up for our mailing list, and you'll become aware of those events. And so with no further delay, let me introduce you, and please join me in welcoming the president and founder of EMCA, who will also introduce and host tonight's panel, Mr. Lou Katsos.
Thank you, John, for that introduction. For those of you who don't know anything about the organization, we're a new organization. We only started in September. And as John indicated, we've had a lot of different events. Some of them are related, obviously, to the development, design, and construction aspect of what we like to do. But also we've had cultural events. We've had a geopolitical event by a presenter, Dr. Vlahos, who's a well-known commentator, professor, author, who spoke on the topic of what's happening in the Middle East and will the United States get in a major war in the next 18 months. So we have different types of topics. We also sponsored an art exhibit. There was an artist from Greece who had a wonderful exhibit called Yaya, Tell Me Your Story, which we did at the Hellenic Consulate in New York. And we're also, in the near future, going to have some other events that are of importance also, and unique events. On April 14th, we are going to have the East Mediterranean Harlem Blues Concert, which is going to be at St. Peter's in the City Corps building. We're going to mix African American music, blues music, with the Hellenic blues, which is called the Rebetika. And here we're going, and it's a first-time event. It's never happened before in the United States, or really anywhere, where we're going to bring two cultures from two different continents and really discuss the blues or play the blues, because And what our organization is about is, although we're all from different cultures, we have a lot of similarities. And the blues is certainly something that should be very interesting to everyone. In May, we're going to have the second National Hellenic American Genealogy Conference. We had the first one in New York last year. And this conference is going to be in Chicago at the National Hellenic Museum. We've assembled a group of scholars from the historical side as well as the genealogy side. So that should be very exciting. And in June, in concert with what's happening at the UN in the Global Compact Leadership Summit, which is happening in June 22nd and June 23rd, we're going to have an event on June 21st, which is basically going to be another panel discussion, but the topic is going to be business and peace. And we'll have one of the foremost scholars, researchers in that particular area who will have a panel assembled actually from the UN Global Compact Leadership Council, which is coming into New York. So we have a lot of different events. We are a new organization. But one thing we've always wanted to do, because many of us who founded this organization, which includes myself, which includes John, which includes Ahmed, okay, which is back there, and Hassan Bibarai, who happens to own the Russian tea room, by the way. And so it started from sitting down having coffee every week with Hassan for the last few years. And in discussing various issues around the world, we decided that we needed a different type of organization that related to more than just one culture. Not that we were going to take anything away from any other organization, but we wanted a place where people basically could get together, talk about different issues, and being as Americans, we have cultures, for example, that are getting together that basically maybe are warring with each other, but that's not our thing, because we're Americans, and here we can in fact talk about a lot of different issues in a calm way. For the last few years, we have been doing the design, development, and construction panel discussions, and for those of you who have not attended them before, the reason why they're successful is because they're unscripted. I had no idea what I'm going to ask, and I had no idea what they're going to answer, but it's always interesting, and it makes for quite an interesting chat with people that share a commonality, but in many areas are, in many ways are from different areas within the business. Normally what we do is we discuss, in these panel discussions, what's happening in New York in terms of construction, in terms of development, in terms of what the forecast is, etc. Tonight is going to be a little bit different because we're going to bring an international flavor to it. So I'm very pleased with the panel we put together. We always pick a theme for mythology. This is something that we started years ago. So every event that we have for the panel has a particular topic. So if the industry is going great, we have a panel called the Phoenix Rises. If the industry is not going great at that particular time, the Flight of Icarus. Okay, so Icarus may go into the sea. So tonight our topic is, and I think part of the reason why many people come to these events has nothing to do with the event at all. They come to the event to find out, like, what the hell is Lou going to talk about in terms of the mythology of the particular event. Tonight we called it In Search of the Golden Fleece. And the topic is very interesting in terms of mythology. It goes back 3,500 years, actually, with Jason and the Argonauts. I'm not going to mention the classical names of the areas, but it has to do basically with Jason, who was really the person who should have been the king, but the throne was usurped from his father, and he came back to what is now Volos in Greece, and said to the king, I should really be the king. And the king was very worried because the king had also gone to the Oracle of Delphi, and the Oracle had stated that one day someone's going to come with one sandal, and when that person comes with one sandal, he may take over your throne. So The story is that Jason, who was basically kept in hiding so he wouldn't be killed by the king, was coming down into Volos. He was crossing the stream, but being the gentleman that he was, he carried a lady across the stream, and basically he lost one of his sandals. When he went into Volos, the king saw him without the shoe, so he said, without the sandal, and basically said, okay, I'll make you the king, but in order to be the king, you have to bring back the golden fleece. Now, the golden fleece was actually on the east end of the Black Sea, and from a mythological point of view, it was extremely difficult, and many people had tried to get the golden fleece, but most of them had basically died. So he assembled heroes, superheroes of the age, and basically headed to what is now Georgia to get the golden fleece. I'm not going to continue this because it may take too long. But let's just say, what is this all about? What it's all about is this. Everyone is searching for the golden fleece. Okay, they're searching for the gold. In some cases, the gold is going internationally, as in the case of the chairman of Turner International. In some cases, the gold is coming into the U.S., let's say, in the case of Kuafu, and some gold coming into this particular area. In terms of the golden fleece, although it's a mythology that goes back many years, the actual fact of the golden fleece had to do with, in the past, they used to use actually the fleece of a lamb to actually filter out the water to get gold. So they would hang up the fleece and then the gold basically would come out. So there is some truth to the thing. So let's just start off with the panelists. I have a great panel. And if you can, starting with David, just introduce yourselves, go a little bit into your backgrounds, and we'll just start asking some questions.
David Rothstein from Executive Vice President of Construction at Extel. I'm with Extel 11 years and have built one of the many buildings I built with Extel right across the street, 157, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. I've been in the business my whole life, working in New York. In fact, in the early part of my career, Lou was my boss, and I worked for Lou. I was one of the only ones who survived. Prior to Extel, I was with Langan Partners, who's a national developer. We built hotels in San Francisco, Miami, Boston, Washington, D.C., and several residential buildings in Manhattan. Right now, we have about 15 different sites in one phase or another of construction, either demolition or site prep or finishing, meaning getting ready to open.
And how many total square feet are we talking about in general?
Well over about 3 million.
3 million square feet. And how many of those jobs are, for example, union versus non-union?
Predominantly union, and so let's say we're about 85% union.
Okay, great, thank you, Dave.
So Alan Poeppel, I'm with Langan, senior principal with Langan Engineering. I don't want to say the full name because it's a long name that the state of New York makes us give ourselves. In any case, we're a multidisciplinary civil engineering firm. For those that don't know us, in the city, we've got about 200 people in the city. I've been with Langan over 25 years. George Billotti, who was supposed to be here, and unfortunately had a overseas family emergency, couldn't make it, but George hired me just about 25 years ago. I'm a Midwestern guy, so New York is my second home. I think sometime this year I'll pass 50% of my time in New York versus Chicago, so it really is my second home. And just I started my career working on actually public schools. There was a lot of public work going on in the early to mid-90s, and then actually working with David was one of the first high-rise buildings I worked on in New York, downtown, and back in Park City. So David's built. We followed David through his various stops, and it's been a great ride.
Can you tell us a little bit about the reach of Langan, because it's not just a local firm, but it's obviously an international firm.
Yeah, that's right. So Langan, our headquarters are in northern New Jersey, and about half the company is between New York and northern New Jersey. But we have the Northeast corridor from New Haven down to DC, Miami, West Coast, Bay Area. We've got 4 offices in the Bay Area, LA, and we have half a dozen folks in Abu Dhabi. We've got a couple of folks in Istanbul, a couple of folks in London. So our international reach is focused mostly on the Middle East, but myself personally, I've worked in India, I'm working in Malaysia right now, worked in Saudi Arabia as well. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about the project that you're doing now in the tallest building actually in the world?
yeah, so they call it Jeddah Tower now, so it's in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and the team, project team was Adrian Smith, Gordon Gill Architecture out of Chicago, 2 old SOM guys. And Adrian was actually the lead designer for Burj Khalifa as well. Thornton Thomas Studies, Chicago office was the lead designer, structural designer for it, and Langan was the foundation designer for that project. So it's, as you say, it's a project of a career, and it's a project of a lifetime. So the Jeddah Tower is, for those who don't know, is 1,000-meter tall tower, more than 1,000 meters, so it's more than 1 kilometer tall. Will be, when it's completed, by 150 meters, so 300 feet, the tallest building in the world. And the current foundations were completed about 2 years ago, and it's up about 150 to 200 meters at this point.
Jeff?
Hi everybody, Jeff Dvorett with Kuafu Properties, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to you all here in the Russian Theater tonight. I started my career not in real estate, but in strategy consulting, and after several years of traveling around the world producing beautiful, beautiful PowerPoint documents, I decided that I wanted my career to have something more tangible associated with it in terms of the production of real estate. And so shortly thereafter, I started working in New York in this great field that we all share, and had the pleasure of working with David at Extel for just I guess a little over 8 years, and collaborated on the beautiful project across the street at 157. About 2 years ago, I left and I joined the platform Kuafu Properties, which is about a year or so older than my tenure with them. And in that short period of time, we've assembled not quite the Extel pipeline of development, but we are actively working on 4 projects here in New York right now. All of them have a residential component to them, and some have some additional components as well. And Kuafu was founded with the principle that we could pair local development and construction, acquisition, property management, brokerage expertise with overseas capital. And so 2 of the principals of the firm are both Chinese nationals that reside here in the U.S. full-time. And a great deal of our work is introducing New York real estate to the Chinese market.
Thank you, Jeff. Nick?
Hi. My name is Nick Billotti. I work with the Turner Construction Company. I work with the International Group, and I have since January 3rd, 1977. And I've had the pleasure of representing the company in many different countries, in many parts of the world, and it's been a real trip. Anyone in the industry knows that Turner's a large company in the United States. I'm not sure that you all know that we have a considerable presence outside of the United States. We're in Europe, mostly Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Asia Pacific, India, South America, and we have been for the long term. What's a little bit interesting and different about working outside of the United States for us is that we're not contractors in the places where we do business outside the U.S. We're more project managers and construction managers. We don't have the risk appetite for places like Luanda, Angola, where we have worked and parts of Vietnam and other locales. And we don't see ourselves in the market as bringing we see ourselves as bringing the brand, not the brawn, to the marketplace. So as we work in locations outside of the United States, we work with clients to help them organize with the design and the construction of very sophisticated projects. Burj Khalifa is one of them, still the tallest building. Okay? Taipei 101 is today's third tallest building. We also worked on the second tallest building, which is in Mecca of all places, the clock tower. But we work in these locales, again, bringing the brain, not the brawn, and we've had a great experience. And what I will tell you that's a little bit maybe different is that as we have gone off and we've sold ourselves as managers of the design process and managers of construction, because as you think of Turner, you think of a contractor, due to the lack of real development expertise in so many of the markets where we have worked, we have found ourselves sucked upstream in the process. So we'll walk in and we'll sit with a client who wants to build a hotel, and this is a true story in Saudi Arabia, and I find myself asking him, why do you want to do that? And he'll say to me, well, because, my architect said this is a great location for a hotel. I said, well, have you done any market analysis, financial feasibilities? And if this is a hotel, particularly in Saudi, I mean, who's your target clientele? It certainly isn't, vacationers. And, on the serious side, he sat back and thought about it, and we convinced him to bring in a firm that would help him with a market analysis and a feasibility study, and we did a great project, but it wasn't a hotel. It was a set of apartments. And so, I think it's important in our industry, be it in New York or outside of the United States, that we live to those values that have always, made the difference in our success. You're honest with the people that you work with. We could have easily gone out and built a hotel, and I had no idea as to whether or not he would develop anything when I challenged him on the idea of building a hotel. But he did it, and you know what? It was the start of a relationship that has endured almost 15 years, because we were honest with him and we didn't allow him to make a mistake. But again, it's a couple of things. A part of it is that we're sucked upstream in the process, and we found ourselves doing what a developer would do in the United States, in many of the parts of the world where we work. And then it's delivering on the values and the culture that we carry as a US-based company, with the honesty, integrity, and it may sound corny, but this is all absolutely true. And for that, we received, just a tremendous, tremendous amount of, I wouldn't say work, but, people like to work with us. They know that when we're in the business to assist them, we're doing it for them, not for us. So there's great allegiance towards the Turner Construction Company. I have some friends here like Ted, Maurice, and others who can vouch that, over the years, we've tried to practice our business as well as it can be practiced in the places where we do business. And we work in some pretty rough neighborhoods.
David, you talked about a number of buildings that you're involved in right now. What type of buildings are they in terms of the building type? And is there a specific building type that the company targets and really likes?
Well, we predominantly is all residential.
Is it condo or rental or both?
Both. It's a combination of both now. We predominantly have been developing condos over the years, but now we're diversifying a little bit into rentals. So we have a 500-unit rental building on the 10th Avenue and 41st Street. That'll be opening up in September of this year. For example, in one on 14th Street, but most of the other buildings are condominiums.
And the strategy to sort of not exit from the condominium market, but basically go less on the condo side and go more on the rental side, is that based on some of the economics of what's taking place in the marketplace?
At the time, yes, it was always about the economics and what the land was. In some cases, we have a couple of deals that are land leases, and so therefore, these workers are kind of doing it, so
So it's a pure analysis, basically.
pure analysis.
But basically the market that you're targeting, your company's targeting, is the residential market.
Basically, yeah, all residential.
What are you finding in terms of this current age, in terms of the work that's out there versus the supply of contractors in the marketplace?
Although the supply of contractors today is depending on what size project it is, but there's a lot of very large projects. I think there's about 6 extremely large projects, and I would say, over 1 million square feet going in now. And the supply of people at that level is very thin. And when the supply is thin, the price is up, and efficiency is down, and so we're really suffering, I think, in that part of the market.
What particular trades are we having problems with on the larger type projects?
We're seeing that, I'd say, more on the mechanical end, and that's probably one of the more expensive part. I mean, one of the expensive parts of the project, the number one thing is structure. So there are special contractors, but the mechanical and the electrical especially is the market that I'd say is probably the thinnest right now.
And what are you finding when you go on the non-union side? Are you finding the same thing, or there's other type of contractors that are problematic?
I think the non-union side is also getting overtaxed. So, but our non-union projects are not of a large scale, so I think they're a little easier to control.
And are you finding a decent array of contractors in the non-union world?
Yeah, decent. We're thinning it out.
Okay.
We really have to filter it and finding who can actually perform and how smart they are about what they're doing.
And are you doing combo projects? In other words, we have a project that has non-union contractors and union contractors on the same job?
We are doing a little bit of that, yes. So what I would call open shop.
Very good, thank you. Alan, there's a reason why you were selected by E&R Magazine as one of the 25 newsmakers for 2016. Can you tell us about that? Why did they choose you?
Well, it's the project I spoke about earlier, which is the jet tower in Saudi. So I was sort of Langan's lead designer on that day-to-day on that project. So.
But explain what was so difficult about that from for the layman, let's say.
Yeah, no, for the layman. So it's a as I describe it, it's twice as heavy as Burj Khalifa. It is in softer ground than Burj Khalifa. So, I mean, this is it's a massive building, massively heavy building that.
So what are you doing? What are you doing about it? What are you designing? Tell us about it.
So for the foundation guys in the audience, and I saw John said that before, the thing weighs at the foundation, or the pressure at the foundation level is 30 tons per square foot over about almost an acre area. So it's a massively heavy building. And it's in a, there's rock at the surface, which is nice, but it's a very porous coral reef really that turned into a limestone. So it's a very porous rock, very soft rock. So it's we're supported on piles, 5-foot diameter piles that range in depth anywhere from 150 to 330 feet below ground. So it's and we're predicting on the order of about 4 to 5 inches of settlement on the project. So say that to a developer in New York, and you go, what? It's Miami, right?
Exactly.
Which is true. It's a very similar geology to Miami, but it's 3 times as tall as any building that's ever been done in Miami. So it's a very, very challenging.
In terms of your career, what was the most challenging building that you were involved in terms of the geotech aspect?
Well, I mean, that has to be it.
That's it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, your company is obviously new in the market. I'm also a professor, by the way. I don't let the students chat. I do have some of my students here tonight. I don't want them to think that I treat you any differently. Jeff, obviously your company is new in the marketplace. What type of development are they targeting? What type of properties are they targeting? What market are they going into? What is their interest really?
It's really interesting. I think that China is a very large economy. It's not the same size as the United States yet, but it is it's one of the few largest in the world. And I think that there is an assumption that there is that it's a homogeneous market in terms of what people are looking for. And I think that it is more homogeneous than the United States is, but it's not homogeneous. And so my experience over the last year and a half has been that as we go out and talk to investors that are coming from China, there is a wide band in terms of what they're looking to participate in. I would say that there's certain commonalities amongst who we talk to, but there is no one size fits all in terms of what people are looking for. I think that the biggest thing is trying to find deals and projects that are easily digestible and understandable, because there are a number of the projects that David works on and the rest of the panel has worked on are on the ends of the kind of the more complicated projects. And I think the more explanation and things that could go left or right or sideways that can happen in the development plan make the deal harder to understand and underwrite for somebody who's coming into New York and investing maybe for the first time outside of their country and oftentimes for the first time in the United States. So with that, to be a little bit more specific, what I'd say is that we found that deals in Midtown are, it's a central business district that seems to resonate very well. Deals sometimes downtown also resonate very well. I think that there are some groups that we talk to that really understand development in the boroughs, and others that don't even want to talk about it. It's Manhattan or nothing. So I think that our strategy as a firm is, it's kind of like, I think of us in some ways kind of like the investment manager for a large fund, because we have investors that are current investors, people that we'd like to do work with, that are approaching us on a daily basis. And we have the fiduciary to not only figure out what they want to invest in, but also what we think is a good investment as well. And so trying to find an overlap right now has been exceptionally challenging. So I think that where the market is, and it's still very hot for lots of different property types for land acquisition. And so we've gravitated more in the projects that we've actually done to projects that have a condo component to them, because we feel like they're deals that we can underwrite and stand behind, and that it will deliver the level of returns that our investors are looking for.
Nicholas, many of us are actually are clueless in terms of the foreign market. How do you make these arrangements? How do you find the clients? How do you get paid? These things are kind of interesting to some of us, especially in certain countries. Can you just share some of the your vast knowledge in the foreign market, of dealing in foreign markets, and also, if you can, go into the construction process itself, and what are some of the challenges in some of the nations that you're working with?
Yes, that's really important for us. We want to know that the people we're working with at some point are going to pay their bills. And we've been working overseas long enough and have developed relationships that we kind of understand the marketplace. We know that if we have an assignment with Emaar Properties in Dubai, well, it may be tough. Eventually, we're going to be paid. We know when we work with SPG out in Saudi Arabia, you may not get paid for a while. It could take some time before your invoices are processed and the payment comes. But I would say generally we're real careful about the clients that we work with. There are times when we want them to set up an LC, which they fund, and we get paid on a regular basis, and it's a rotating LC where they continue to put money into it as we draw down money to pay our fees. It really is dependent upon who we're working with. We also look for an upfront payment. We try to stay cash positive. It's not always possible. But I will say that over the years, over my 40 years and the company's 50 years, we've been pretty successful at collecting on the monies that are owed us. But that's because we choose our clients as much as they choose us to work for people who have, we've had good experience or have had good experiences in the marketplace.
Do you like to work in markets where there's, let's say, existing laws would stick? and less of a, you know, a control, let's say, of the economy by the political elements, or how does that fit into the?
We have worked in many places, and we certainly look for places that are socially and politically stable. We like to work in places that have a rule of law. It doesn't always hold. We've worked in Brazil, for instance, and when you're an American working in Brazil, it can be extremely difficult because it's a country that has a very socialistic leaning, particularly when you get to the courts. And, you know, if there's a question between, you know, a large American contractor or construction management firm from out of America and anything that is local, you know, you'll find yourselves on the short end of the stick. And what it really is staying out of those situations. Don't get yourself into a situation where you're going to find yourself subject to local law. But generally, we practice on the basis of relationships. We don't have lawyers write our agreements. We write our agreements with our clients. We do it on the basis of services, client responsibilities. We do it on the basis of trust with that client. But it's, you know, if you don't get paid, they don't call you a lawyer, because that will never work.
No, that's not.
You know, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it'll work for them as they start building you.
You know, you don't, I don't know that, I think once we tried suing someone outside of the United States, and it was very painful.
What do you do on the contracting side? In other words, are there GCs under you, or do you subcontract the work?
What we'll do is we'll go out and often we'll hire, let's say for Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. It is still the most.
Still there.
Okay, we're looking. I'm not going to say anything.
Hey, don't listen, that's the tallest building in the world right now.
There's a lot of issues with Saudi Arabia at the moment, and some of the monies
It
that.
looks like it personally.
No, nothing
No,
personal.
I'm just kidding.
I helped George with this.
No.
Any case, let's say Burj Khalifa. You know, we're looking for we'll call it a prime contractor, not a general contractor. Because we want to have an ability to select the elevator contractor, the curtain wall contractor, the mechanical contractor, the electrical contractor, and so many of the trades that are going to work on the job. So we'll look to a prime contractor, and in this case it was a three-way joint venture among Samsung, B6, and Arabtech. So you had the deep pockets of a Samsung and some of the experiences that they carried from doing some of the very tall buildings in Malaysia and other places. You look at B6 for the experience that they have, the expatriate experience working in the Emirates, and Arabtech, the very local experience, that they could bring a lot of the labor to so many of the trades that they would self-perform. But we went out and picked the elevator contractor, that was Otis, and then you assign it to the prime contractor for a certain fee that would attract to that particular contractor. And we picked the mechanical contractor, the electrical contractor. So we tried, you know, we tried to put the best team together that we could. A prime, and then we call them nominated subcontractors. And then the responsibility for the administration and the cost of those nominated subs went to, I'll call it Samsung. Samsung was the lead in the joint venture. And they would have to agree. Once they agreed on accepting that trade contractor, they owned the trade contractor. But we wanted to have the ability to go out and to pre-qualify them, to make sure that they understood precisely what they would do, when they would do it, the organization they would bring, the equipment they would bring, and you go on, so on and so forth, to ensure that they could do the job. We work typically on larger, sophisticated jobs because, frankly, on smaller jobs, the client can't really afford the services that we bring. So.
David, we talked about the trades, we talked about the problematic issues, etc. Let's talk a little bit about the engineers and the architects. I know some of them are here today. What's your thought about what's happening on that side of the equation? In other words, mechanical, structural engineers, and architects. Now, in the old days, we used to say architects suck, if you remember. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
You said that.
No, I don't.
You know, in New York, I'd say it's almost similar because they're also very taxed, right? Because look how much work is going on, and there's just so many people they can hire, and so much growth they can withstand, and so much expertise at the mid and higher levels that is available to service the clients. So, you know, in terms of the way, you know, we've sort of, our strategy has been to try and stick with, on the engineering side, maybe 1, 2 structural engineers at most, because they kind of know how we work and they know what's expected. The same on the mechanical level. Mechanical engineer, we use probably 3. And architecturally, we're always in search of
A good architect.
a good architect. But more so, you know, not just on the execution, but
I'm just kidding, architects. I'm just kidding.
look, you know, our buildings, you know, many of them are iconic, and Gary definitely looks for that exquisite design, and who's going to bring it to the table for that particular site.
Do you, in many cases, hire a design architect and a working architect for a project?
That seems to be the norm today, is to get, you know, maybe it's an architect, and then an executive architect who's going to execute the plans, the permitting, and the construction documents, and they're taxed too. So.
So it's also problematic in that area also.
I think it's the same thing. We're at a, you know, we're at a point where the bubble's pretty big right now for everybody. And on the consultant side, the engineering and architecture is no different.
Alan, can we discuss fee structures, for example? Because I noticed that you know, the geotech costs are always a little too high for any project. How do you do that?
Well, yeah, obviously, we've eliminated the competition, so. Look, I mean, it's, I would say this, that without avoiding, I'm gonna avoid your question and say.
I know you're gonna avoid my
say
question.
it this way. No, I mean, I'm gonna follow on what Nick said a little bit. I mean, I think one of the underrated exports of the U.S. is the knowledge of the design and construction industry. And, you know, there are world-class, I would say the majority of the world-class designers and contractors reside in the U.S. and it's a tremendous export to the rest of the world. And of course, you have to know, as Nick said, yeah, how are you going to get paid? You have to be, you want to be in a place where you're needed, you're wanted, and you're appreciated. So if you don't have all 3 of those, it's going to be a challenge. As designers, we run into, I don't know, if Nick, you see that with Turner, we see, initially, when it's a really emerging market, we see a lot of, they need us, they need either US or Western Europe designers to build super tall towers and other large projects. And then oftentimes you're partnered with a local design team to actually do the filing, registered in that country. But then there's some places where we've worked, and Saudi is one of them, where there are clearly people that are protecting their turf, and it becomes, it can be a very difficult working relationship.
Well, what also happens, obviously, if you do the design of certain types of structures, major structures, small structures, etc. Obviously, you develop that resume where someone's looking for the best. I mean, you develop the reputation of being the best, let's say, in your particular area. So there is a demand for your services by many people.
Right. And to come back to your question, initially, in all seriousness, I mean, we as a firm think that we add a lot of value to projects, whether it's in innovative foundation designs that are less costly and can be executed in a shorter amount of time. So time is money. So in all seriousness, we think that we provide that value, and that's why we charge.
Let me just add a little to what Alan's saying. We find ourselves, as we manage the design process as well as the construction process, to try to guide owners to go out, and when you buy, you don't buy on the basis of price, you buy on the basis of experience and value. And early on your project in Jeddah, they were looking to buy people who had absolutely no experience with super tall buildings, but they had a good price. So how do I spend twice as much when I can buy the same services on paper? So our job is to try to guide the clients. Your job is to try to sell the client that you can't buy on the basis of price. You have to buy on the basis of the experience, the expertise, the value that someone like Langan will bring to the marketplace, or bring to, a super high-rise building in Jeddah. And I agree, some of the worst soil conditions you're going to find anywhere.
I remember when John Tishman was at a room and various owners would ask him about the prices too high and this and that. And what he basically would say is, let me ask you a question. When you go to the brain surgeon, do you say to him, your price is too high and I'm going to go to a cheaper brain surgeon, the guy who has less background and experience? And it was an interesting line, quite frankly. Jeff, let me ask you a question. With foreign investors, what type of architects are they interested in? In other words, I know from what you just stated is that perhaps some of the investors, let's say from China, want the best properties, and the best properties in their minds are in Manhattan. Is the same type of logic relate to the choice and selection of architects?
Absolutely. I think that, and I don't know that it's unique to China. I think that that's kind of the evolution of what's happened in New York, just generally speaking. But I think that it's a very brand-aware and conscious culture about everything in terms of the retail space, the real estate space. But it's interesting because not always do the same brands that resonate with a U.S. audience fully translate to China, and vice versa. So I think that we constantly are out, and it's been a hugely educational process for me over the last 18 months as to taking for granted what things that I think would resonate abroad that people just don't care about, and the like. And I think that we're still early enough in our own exploration of this that I'm not 100% sure yet. We're doing some different things in different projects. For example, on our conversion of Mima Tower, we've brought in 3 top Architectural Digest interior designers who are all participating in the interior design of this project. And I personally think it's a home run in terms of a U.S. audience who's going to understand that we've taken this building which is already a very well-designed building, to the next level of design. But it's all interior designers, it's not architects. And I think that it's going to be an interesting experiment for us to see how that resonates with the Chinese audience.
Certainly, Nicholas, in some of the projects you worked on, some of these architects are among the top in the world, I would imagine. What is your experience with some of these real high-end architects internationally?
It's been a little bit mixed, and it's not necessarily the architect, but it's what the client is willing to buy. You find that they'll go out, it's a bizarre mentality, and you'll pick many of the world-famous architects next to one another for some of the larger sophisticated buildings or some of the smaller ones. And what the architects will do, and they're required to do, is to team with local architects and engineers. And the architect, and maybe an SOM, it may be a Gensler, it may be a Perkins Eastman, who knows whom it may be. But what they will do is they'll cut a scope that's fairly narrow, and they'll go out and they'll do the basic design, the schematics, and somewhere in DD they'll turn it over to their local partner. And you got to be really careful with that. You've got to buy that architect's continued service through the completion of the construction documents. Because you can have a great design that's taken somewhere into DD, and then you turn it over to a local partner who will not do the detailing and the coordination that's required to have a successful project. It's to convince the client to buy the extended service of the base architect, to extend, right through the completion of the project. And for architects today, I find, it's a little bit of a criticism of architects today, very content to sell the design, maybe even take it to final design, but once it's in construction, we walk away, and then it's for someone else to administer the design, to administer the architecture through the construction phase. And I think that they have to work harder to sell their services through the completion of the project. If they want a project that's consistent with their original intent, they've got to stay with it. It's up to people like us who represent the clients to ensure that the client understands the importance of that and that they're willing to pay for that service. But overseas, we've had, we've worked with Foster, we've worked with Skidmore and Gensler, and you name them, and we've worked with them. And it's not so much the architect, where we have something lacking. It's often what the client is willing to pay for the service that they offer.
We're going to wrap it up now, and if you can, one by one, based on your area, whether it's local or international or specific to geotech, can you just give us your thoughts where we are in the development cycle? Because that's what we're always looking to see. Where are we going? What's happening? What is next year going to look like? I know we can't predict what's going to happen in a couple of years, but there have been a lot of articles written, in particular relating to the local market, that, have we peaked? Are we heading downwards right now? Are there too many apartments in the market? Are there too many condos in the market? Are the prices going down? Is there going to be a downturn in the market? Are the land values going down, etc.? How do you see in your individual areas the market cycle currently and where it's heading in your minds?
Well, I guess in terms of the, what's out there in terms of product and how many apartments are in the mix, still for sale, and to be completed, maybe Faith will probably tell us about that. But my view is that it is very busy out there, and when it gets this busy on all the sectors, to me, it's almost scary. There's a lot of high-end product that's been built, there's a lot of high-end product that's on the market, and there's a lot of high-end product that's still coming to the market. So it's definitely something to have concern about. From what you hear of the contractors in the contracting community, people have a decent backlog, but that's through 16. So I would be concerned about what's happening in, let's say, the second half of 17. And to go along with that is what the appetite for the lenders is in terms of financing on the construction side, which is not always it's always a risky thing for the banks. So I'd say that the times are really trying. So everybody should be wary of that.
Okay, I know you don't want to say it's going.
Well, I'm not saying it's taking a steep drop. No, we have 15 things in the mix right now. We have a large building right across the street between 7th and Broadway. It's going to be the tallest building in Manhattan, residential. It's 1,500 feet. We're 200 feet up, so we got 1,300 feet to go. So, but this is a project that's 4 years out. So, maybe we get a little lucky, like we did on 57th Street, and we'll get it, right? And but I think there is a tremendous amount of work out there, and when there's this much work and this much going on, it's definitely scary. Because eventually, these musical chairs, eventually music stops, and there's not a chair for everybody. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I think the water is getting a little choppy. Some of the other residential developers that we work with won't start a high-end condo job right now. It's just they look at it as being too risky right now. Rentals, yes, our clients are still there's still an appetite for rentals that we're seeing. I think sort of to speak to some of the inflation in the construction market that David was talking about, we've had two, without naming names, we've had two large institutional projects that are in, let's say, schematic design, early DD, that are getting the numbers back and pressing pause. It's like, wait a minute, we don't have that much. We've either got a slow-footed or dial it back. But that said, we have one of my barometers is we have a survey department. So how busy are the surveyors? And they're still pretty good. Our guys are still pretty busy. We're starting to see commercial developments in Brooklyn. On the end of a lot of residential developments. Starting to see commercial buildings there. There's a lot of activity in Gowanus Canal area. It may not be this cycle, maybe next cycle. But we're working, our folks are, especially on the environmental side, are working with a lot of property owners over there. And this is my personal opinion, is the next frontier is the South Bronx. But that's,
I totally agree, by the way, the Bronx is next.
I think that's the next cycle, but we're starting to see activity there as well.
Very good. Jeff, your thoughts?
Sure. I'm not going to say whether or not we're in the third inning, the seventh inning, the 12th inning, whatever baseball analogy we want. But I think another way that's interesting to look at it, and it's the way that we actually look at the market right now and have, is that I think that in the last couple of years, while the market has been very good, there have been projects that have been phenomenally successful and projects that have been phenomenal failures. And I think that we are in a different age of information where the consumer has access to far more data, the brokers have access to far more data, and can really make a much more educated buying, renting decision than they've ever been able to make in the past. And I think that what we're going to see in the next couple of years is more of that. I think that there are going to continue to be projects that are phenomenally successful through the next couple of years, and I think there are going to be other projects that are phenomenal failures. And I don't know how many of each are going to happen, but I think that when the market gets to the point where it is, it really is even more on a test on your partners and on your team to really find the right deals and to do things in a smart way, whereas when things are just up, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Well, what are some of the aspects of a phenomenally failing project? In other words, what are some of the parameters that go into a failing project? Is it cost? Is it the team? Is it the wrong decisions, the wrong market? What is it?
I think that there's a lot of pitfalls that we all know that can happen through the development process. I think probably the biggest opportunity, the moment where there's the biggest opportunity to make a mistake is at the beginning. And I think that most of it comes in the initial buying decision. If you buy something that's too expensive, it's very hard to ever come back from it. And I think that said, lots of people have come out to the market and too aggressive. And once you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So if you come out to the market and you reach for too much, maybe you're not going to get as much as you would have gotten if you would set your expectations properly at the first point. So that comes from having the right set of the right teams, the right marketing consultants, the right designers. If a project takes 6 months longer to design than may have been if the client made proper decisions along the way, if they had drawings along the way. It's not a architect, it's not a client, it's the client-architect kind of working relationship through the process. But I think that if I had to pick one spot, it's if you buy wrong, it's very hard to have a successful project.
Nicholas, on the farm market, what are you seeing out there?
Well, first let me just say what Jeff said is absolutely consistent with anything and everything you do almost anywhere. I agree completely. The projects are made at the front end. They're made on a market analysis, the feasibility studies, and you need to bring in pros to do it. If I walk into a client's office and ask him, now we're managing design and construction, say, I'd like to see your market analysis and your feasibility study. And they said, well, you kidding? I said, no, we want to know that we're going to participate. We want to participate in a winner. He says, well, we've done it. I said, who did it for you? So we did it in-house. And doesn't matter. You've got a big problem. Because, they're looking for self-fulfilling prophecies. So you're looking for the solid, thoughtful, financial decisions at the front end of a project. And then you bring in the right team to design it, the right team to buy it out, and the right team to build it. Quickly, as you look at the foreign markets today, the price of oil down around $40 a barrel has impacted many of the places where we work, many of the developing countries. I just spent a week in 4 different countries in the Middle East, and if you go to Saudi Arabia, across the board cuts, 40%. Qatar, 35%, across the board. And there's no reason to it, just cut. Your budget's cut. Everything but the military seems to be touched. Dubai is backing off a little bit, and you're going to see this in many places, but it's not so much the impact on those countries, and Malaysia and Indonesia you can throw in the mix, but it's the money that comes from Saudi Arabia. It's the money that comes from Qatar. It's the money that comes from the Emirates that's finding its place in Eastern Mediterranean, in many projects that we followed, in places like Budva, and in places like, in Serbia, in Greece, and that's starting to dry up because they just don't have the cash that they had before. They don't have enough cash to keep the population satisfied the way they used to, and so the money's not going to go to project development in other places. To me, we'll talk about projects and we'll talk about different, if you look at our backlog, for the last 15, 20 years, we have a little bit of a chart in our company, and we follow the gross domestic product of the United States. You follow the GDP, you know where your industry is going. Typically what happens, if you follow the GDP over the last 6 or 7 recessions, and you watch it, as the GDP starts to turn down, I've had guys in our business, in our company say, well, I don't know what's happening at a GDP level, but we've got a strong backlog, we have a record backlog. I said, well, it's coming. And typically our industry trails the GDP going into a recession or any kind of a downturn by about 6 months going in. So your GDP starts to go down, you're going to find our industry typically tailing off. And really doesn't matter project type, it doesn't, the geographical markets may be affected a little differently. And then coming out, the problem in our industry is that we trail the GDP by about 12 months coming out of a recession. So once the recession is over and you see the GDP starting to move up again, we're still a ways out. So as you look to predict where we're going as an economy in the United States, I think you keep a close eye on how the general economy is progressing. And I think it's fairly stable. The U.S. on a relative basis is doing pretty good, in spite of what the Republicans say. Think of where we were 8 years ago. We're in a pretty good place today, and it's relatively stable. And as I look at the United States and our economy from the places that I visit, it's very stable. It's a great place to be. This is a great country, great economy, and it's great for the developers. Guys like Langan, doing so much engineering. But watch the if you want to do this, you got to watch the macroeconomics as well as the microeconomics. And I think we very smartly always keep an eye on the GDP relative to our business nationwide.
Everyone, a round of applause for that. In particular, I'd like to thank our sponsors who make these type of events possible. Thank you again for coming.